Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating idea, the attempt to find a hidden mathematical code in the Quran. We're going to break down a systematic model that tries to separate what could be a divine blueprint from what might just be, well, human imagination. You know, for centuries, people have claimed to find these incredible numerical patterns in sacred texts, but it always brings up a huge question. Are these patterns for real, or are we just seeing what we want to see? And that really is the heart of the problem, isn't it? If you don't have a strict method, how can you ever prove that a pattern isn't just a coincidence? It's all so subjective, and that's exactly what's led to all the controversy and, honestly, not many real answers. So, to cut through all that speculation, a book called The Divine Code puts forward a really rigorous framework. Let's dive in and break down how this model tries to bring some scientific-style order to the whole search. It's called the Unified Numeric Theological Model, or the UNT model for short. Now, the best way to think of it is like a strict rule book. It's designed to be a verifiable filter that brings some real discipline to a field that, let's face it, has historically been pretty subjective. So what are these rules? Well, the whole model is built on two main things. 4 foundational axioms, think of them as ground rules that every pattern has to follow, and 4 tiers that rank how strong the evidence for any pattern actually is. Okay, so these 4 axioms are the absolute bedrock of the whole system. First, the model starts with an assumption that the text has an intentional design. Second, any real pattern has to show up in at least 2 independent places, like in both the book's physical structure and its historical timeline. Third, and this is a big one, no funny business with the math. Only simple standard stuff is allowed. And finally, for a pattern to be considered legit, it has to pop up again and again at different levels of the text. Now let's talk about the evidence. At the very top, the highest level of proof, you've got Tier 1, explicit patterns. These are the absolute strongest claims because the text literally states the numbers and the equations. There's zero interpretation needed. It's right there in black and white. Okay, one step down from that, we've got Tier 2, which is all about structural patterns. This looks at fixed, physical data, things like the total number of chapters or verses. And since everyone agrees on these numbers, they're also considered very, very strong evidence. Tier 3 is where we really start connecting the dots. These are patterns that you find when you apply simple, valid math, following those strict rules we just talked about, to the solid numbers you found in the first 2 tiers. And finally, we get to the last and most speculative level, Tier 4, linguistic patterns. This is where you get into things like word counts or giving letters numerical values. Now, the model is very clear that this is the weakest tier of evidence, mainly because it's so much more open to interpretation. Okay, so that's the theory behind the model, but how does it actually work when you put it to the test? Let's take a look at some of the key patterns that the book says are totally valid. Here we go, a perfect example of a Tier 1 pattern. The text from Surah Al-Baqarah doesn't just give you the numbers, it actually does the math for you. 3 plus 7 equals a perfect 10. As far as the model is concerned, that's rock-solid proof, undeniable. Next up, here's a great example of a Tier 2 structural pattern. So the Quran has 114 chapters in total. What's really interesting here is that the model points out you can split this structure into 2 perfectly symmetrical halves, 57 chapters in the first half and 57 chapters in the second. Then, the model points to a pattern that is way less obvious, a specific number that it claims pops up from 2 totally different, completely independent paths, and that number is 237. And this is supposed to be a fantastic example of that multi-domain consistency rule. The claim is, you get to 237 in 2 different ways. The historical way is pretty straightforward. You add the chapter numbers of the first 3 revelations. But the structural path is different. You're not adding. You take the numbers of 3 key chapters, 2, 3, and 7, and just line them up. Bam, you get 237. And the model argues that finding the exact same number from 2 very different methods is a pretty big deal. Okay, but here's something that's just as important. A really good, rigorous model isn't just about what it accepts. It's also about what it rejects. This is where the whole framework is really put to the test. So, how exactly does it filter out all the noise? Well, it uses that rule we talked about, mathematical rigor, as a kind of gatekeeper against claims that might look impressive at first glance, but just don't hold up under scrutiny. And here's exactly how that works. If a pattern someone proposes requires you to do something kind of arbitrary, like reversing digits or using some wild, complex math for no good reason, the UNT model just throws it out. It's a simple rule, really, but it's an incredibly powerful filter. So, when you step back and look at the whole picture, what are the bigger implications here? What does applying a structured mathematical model to a sacred text actually mean? Well, the book argues there are three major implications. Theologically, proponents say it provides structured mathematical evidence for a divine origin. Methodologically, it offers a clear, repeatable roadmap for anyone else who wants to do this kind of research. And for interfaith dialogue, it offers a way to discuss the Quran through a totally different lens, one of logic and systematic analysis. And all of this leaves us with one big, fascinating question to chew on. No matter what you personally believe, applying a rigorous mathematical lens to an ancient text like this is a pretty mind-bending exercise. What if there really is a hidden architecture, a deep structure, just sitting there beneath the surface, just waiting for us to find the right key?